Here, we want to look at significant turbulence encounters in other weather situations and how to best fly the airplane when it gets bumpy. After thunderstorms, another turbulent place is downwind of mountain ranges when the wind is strong and perpendicular to the range. Still another bumpy time is as and a while after fronts occlude. There is often significant turbulence in connection with troughs aloft. Frequently, moderate turbulence will be forecast on one of those marvelous windy post-frontal days, and it will be bumpy out there, but we all know that. That type of turbulence is never a surprise. The big mountain bumps come downwind of the mountains, and the potential for the most severe turbulence is in the rotor that forms just below the ridge level, definitely a place to avoid when flying IFR. The minimum en route altitude puts you a minimum of 2,000 feet above the ridge level. But if there is a rotor downwind of the range, that may not be enough. There could also be a strong downdraft there, one that might be more powerful than the airplane's ability to climb, and that could put the airplane in or in close proximity to the rotor. This is not just a Rockies problem. The mountains of the east can spawn considerable turbulence as well as strong up and down drafts. An item of technique in IFR mountain flying would be in not flying airways where the MEA is within 4,000 to 6,000 feet of the airplane's service ceiling when it is moderately windy. With big wind blowing, best wait for it to calm down. If the wind at the ridge level is forecast or reported 40 knots or greater, significant problems could lurk on the downwind side of the ridge. Convective turbulence is almost always there during warm days and is most active on warm summer afternoons when the winds are light. When IFR in the east, it is usually no problem to top this turbulence, but in the west, over the high desert or mountains, convective turbulence can extend upward to flight level 200 or even higher. In the middle of the afternoon, it can be some of the most bone-jarring turbulence that you will ever find. That's why most desert flyers plan their trips early or late in the day. The cumulus clouds that form in convective turbulence and that may eventually build into cumulonimbus demand respect because they are quite turbulent by the time the tops are at 10,000 feet above the ground and become more turbulent as they grow. Most IFR pilots try to avoid all fair weather cumulus, at least to the extent possible. Wind shear, which means the wind direction and/or velocity is changing with altitude or distance, is a primary cause of the turbulence we encounter when flying IFR. To really understand wind shear turbulence, a pilot has to at least partially immerse himself in the basic study of weather. To not do so is to often fly in a cloud of confusion, wondering what in the devil is causing the weather to do that. Look first at a standard frontal model. Here is the low. Here is the warm front. Here is the cold front. These are the surface positions of the fronts. We know from the textbooks that warm air moves over cold air north of a warm front and that the slope of a warm front ranges from 1 to 50 to 1 to 200, averaging 1 to 100. Looking at it from the side, this means on average that 100 miles north of the surface position of the warm front, the overrunning warm air is 1 mile high, or about 6,000 feet. 200 miles north, it would be at 12,000 feet. Because there is a change in wind direction at the slope of the front, there is some turbulence. Because the air above the slope of a warm front is often unstable, there might also be some turbulence above the slope of the front in cumulus clouds. A cold front has a steeper slope, averaging 1 to 80. In a cold front, the cold air is moving beneath warm air, so 80 miles behind the front, the slope would be 6,000 feet. 160 miles back, it would be at 12,000 feet. If you overlay a 500 millibar chart on all this, you can perhaps better see how the surface flow, in green, varies from the flow aloft, in yellow. When wind changes with altitude, there's wind shear turbulence. You can bet on that. In one more visualization, consider a condition where there is no defined surface storm, but a trough of low pressure is moving over the area. If this is bringing colder air over relatively warm air, there is instability aloft. If the flow at the surface is weak, but the flow aloft is strong, there is wind shear turbulence, bumpy day aloft, in other words. As a matter of reference, the National Weather Service uses a wind change of 40 knots in 150 miles as a guideline in forecasting severe turbulence. Vertically, 10 knots change per 1,000 feet is an indication of severe turbulence. Fronts won't often create this great a change and the resulting severe turbulence. Perhaps the occlusion, where a cold front overtakes a warm front because of a strong circulation around a deepening and slow-moving low, creates the greatest atmospheric confusion and low-level wind shear, and thus the most turbulence. What we can use all this for is in selecting the smoothest altitude to fly when operating in an area affected by a trough aloft or a front. The strength of the wind shear generally determines how large a vertical cross-section will be affected. A strong wind shear can affect a lot of altitudes, but most of the truly strong shears caused by jet stream cores are well aloft and generally affect the air only down to the low to mid-teens.